physicians into underserviced areas.
The honourable member for Kings West on his first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we know that those efforts are not making very great strides, because we have Chester, Bridgewater, Lunenburg, 3 vacancies in Tuscott, Argyll, Pubnico, 2 in Barrington, 3 family physicians in Digby, Lockport, Yarmouth, also looking for physicians in Annapolis, Royal, Bridgetown, Kentville and area, Kingston, Greenwood, Middleton, Berwick and Wolfville, 2 physicians in Pictou County, and on we go. Over 1 year ago, April the 20th to be exact, the minister announced a successful bid for the development of a physician resource plan. The tender itself had a time frame completion date of 6 months. According to the minister's own press release, final recommendations were to be shared with government in November. We know that the Annapolis Valley District Board received a briefing on the plan in December. Given that it's now April, why hasn't the physician resource plan been shared with Nova Scotians?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remind the honourable member that during the estimates, I provided a detailed breakdown of the number of GPs who had come to Nova Scotia in the last year and started to practice here, the number who had left, the number of specialists who had come, the number we have lost. We actually had a net gain in both GPs and specialists. Nova Scotia, by any account, in all independent reports, national reports, lead the country in the number of physicians that we have per capita to the number of people who live in this province. Now, that does not mean we can rest on our laurels. We have the highest numbers of physicians per population, but the distribution of those physicians can be very problematic in that we have shortages and chronic shortages in some areas, difficulty getting physicians into certain parts of the province. But more importantly is the need to plan for the future needs of the population. And the Physician Resource Plan will do exactly that. The Physician Resource Plan, as I indicated, is close to completion, and when it is completed, it will be released, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Kings West on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that reminder. Mr. Speaker, this report is supposed to highlight current GP and specialist needs as well as future provincial needs for the next 10 years. It's supposed to align the supply needs for the province with Dalhousie's medical school training, and it's supposed to assist in the development of a healthcare system that provides services equitably across the province. But there are 60,000 Nova Scotians who continue to access emergency rooms for primary care and wait for a family physician. Will the Minister please tell Nova Scotians when they can expect to see a physician resource plan and hopefully assist the communities in need?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is the case that as I indicated, the Physician Resource Plan is close to completion. But I want to remind members that we, in fact, are transforming our healthcare system into a system that is much more collaborative, team-based. And while family doctors, GPs, will remain a cornerstone of the healthcare system, they increasingly are one member of a team that includes nurse practitioners and advanced practice family practice nurses and so forth. And what we are doing is moving to more collaborative care clinics around the province, and in fact opening the collaborative emergency centres across Nova Scotia, such as we've opened in Parsborough, Spring Hill, with a few more to open quite shortly in Annapolis Royal, in Pugwash, and in Tatamagouche. And these centres utilize doctors, the nurse practitioners, paramedics, licensed practical nurses, a whole number of care providers, and the result will be better care sooner, better chronic disease management, better primary care for Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the NDP government consistently used job numbers surrounding the shipbuilding contract that are in the tens of thousands of positions. In winning the bid, Irving was able to ensure a measure of growth for our province. The problem is that the NDP communications did not match the realities on the ground, Mr. Speaker, so my question to the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism, exactly how many Nova Scotians does the Minister project will find new employment with the Irving shipbuilding contracts?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness. And Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the Irving bid, the Conference Board of Canada is projecting at the peak of the contract that there will be well over 11,000 jobs in the province of Nova Scotia. We knew that when we were going into the process, Mr. Speaker. We envisioned that within the first couple of years, for the first 2 or 3 years, that the Irving shipyard will ramp up. It will be in the vicinity. There will be a constant there of 4,000 jobs, in the vicinity of 4,000 jobs, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we hear that the minister uses the number 4,000 to 11,000, so the minister often has advised me not to get hung up on job targets, but Mr. Speaker, that sounds an awful lot like a range of jobs that would be created in the Irving shipyard. So I'm not sure which one it is, Mr. Speaker, but anyway, as we stated in the past and will always continue to do so, Irving's success in winning the contract will benefit Nova Scotia and all Nova Scotians. Where the problem exists is that the NDP spin machine doesn't seem to reflect the reality of the jobs that are going to be created. We know that there's a global interest in this contract, Mr. Speaker. There's keen interest from Scotland, from America, and we also know that jobs attached to this contract are being publicly publicized in the Philippines, Mr. Speaker, and I'll table the article that does so. An article in the Philippine Daily Inquirer carries the headline, "Jobs await Filipino workers at the Canadian shipyard," and that is tabled, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister, what is the minister not presenting a realistic picture to the people of Nova Scotia surrounding jobs connected to Irving?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those numbers that I quote come from the Conference Board of Canada, and I will reiterate, at the peak, during the peak of this, fulfilling this contract, there will be over 11,000 jobs in the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now, you know, there's some things that we have no control over. I mean, if Irving is in the private sector, and I'm not going to stand here in this House and comment, criticize on the procedures of Irving Oil. I don't have the detail and the information to do that, Mr. Speaker, and I will not criticize them here in this House.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're certainly not asking the minister to criticize Irving. We're just asking questions on behalf of the taxpayers who have invested $300 million in this project. So I think it's a fair question. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, shipbuilding is complex work and involves many integrations throughout the process. For the NDP to carelessly overstate job numbers is misleading at best, Mr. Speaker. This contract, which is won fair and square by Irving, will have a positive impact on our economy, which is certainly a great thing for Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians deserve the facts and not spin, and they're just looking for answers on how many jobs are going to be created for the Irving shipbuilding contract. So my question, will the minister tell Nova Scotians what portion of this contract he expects to leave the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, through you, the member asked a question. I quoted numbers that come from the Conference Board of Canada, Mr. Speaker. Those aren't numbers that were manufactured by this government. Mr. Speaker, I will again, so that the member can understand, is that at the peak years of this contract, there will be over 11,000 jobs in the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the most important event. This is the most important event that's happened in Nova Scotia recent history, and certainly, Mr. Speaker, certainly in my lifetime, Mr. Speaker, this is something that we all should be behind, Mr. Speaker, because I know Nova Scotians support this, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the NSCC trains 90% of all apprentices in the province. If this government was really committed to training Nova Scotian workers for Nova Scotian jobs, it would invest in the NSCC. Instead, we learn that the NSCC is facing a budget shortfall of $5.37 million as a result of this government's damaging cuts to post-secondary education. A budget shortfall is not going to address the increased need for training in shipbuilding trades, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister, will the minister tell members of this House how Nova Scotians are going to get training for Nova Scotian shipbuilding jobs if the NSCC is facing a budget shortfall of $5.37 million?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind members of the chamber that this government has invested over $8 million new dollars in trades and training. Much of that is going to be delivered through the community college system. And in addition, there's $250,000 dedicated each year to establish a Centre for Shipbuilding Excellence at the Nova Scotia Community College. We understand what a tremendous investment we're going to be able to make to support the shipbuilding procurement contract, and we have a plan, and we're going to be ready. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yarmouth on his first supplementary.
I know that the minister has announced a $2.75 million investment specifically for shipbuilding related training, but still the NSCC is facing a $5.37 million deficit, Mr. Speaker, as a result of the money cut from their core funding by this government. Will the minister tell members of this House, are the funds committed to shipbuilding related training let's try that again, Mr. Speaker. Are the funds committed to shipbuilding related are they new monies, or are they just funds that this government is recycling from shortchanging the NSCC in the first place?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say it's a combination of new additional funding and also reaffirmation of the core funding that we give to pre-apprenticeship programs through the community college as well. And I just want to remind the honourable member that certainly, like all service providers that are publicly funded in this province, we've asked everyone to look at operational efficiencies. And as we are doing within government as well, there's a way to become more efficient in terms of how we deliver programs without impacting necessarily on the programs themselves. So we are trying to improve both the access and the excellence of trades training and direct access to apprenticeships in this province, as well as making sure that everyone reviews what they do, how they do it, and that the most money possible is going to programming. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yarmouth on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has a knack for renaming money while slashing budgets. We saw it with the Minister of Education when she slashed money to the public education system, and we now see it with this minister cutting the budget and underfunding the NSCC while putting a crowd-pleasing name on money that already exists in the system, Mr. Speaker. Putting a name on a portion of funding does not soften the blow of a $5.37 million budget shortfall, even if there's a photo op attached to it, Mr. Speaker. The 25,000 students at NSCC programs across the province deserve the truth. Will the minister admit that her shipbuilding training announcement was not new funding. It was just window dressing for monies that were already supposed to go to NSCC in the first place.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The province of Nova Scotia is actually giving more money to the Nova Scotia Community College system this year. And we've asked them to reallocate that as much as possible to programming and to look at operational efficiencies. So certainly, they're looking at administration, for example. And so two highly honored principals of two campuses are retiring, and so the community college has looked at that as an opportunity to have shared administration between two sets of community colleges in this province. So they're being innovative, they're protecting the programming and the students in the classroom, and at the same time, they are looking at operational efficiency. So hats off to the community college. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, in response to questions about the fiasco her department created at Talbot House and all the good it did in the community, the Minister of Community Services continues to stress that the report was to address organizational issues. The Minister said in this House, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Any reference in that review is with respect to the organizational workings of that Board of Directors," end quote, and I will table that, Mr. Speaker. However, the report wandered far into allegations, which has since been thoroughly discounted, that were personal and directed at the former executive director. Not organizational issues, Mr. Speaker, but sinister in nature. So my question to the Minister, was the report designed to examine organizational issues, as the Minister claims, or just to take on Talbot House on any issues, including personal smears? Which is it?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, if you review the organizational review that we did, if you read it, you would see within that the information is about the organization. And when you do an organizational review, you must talk to individuals to find out whether they are following policies. And that's exactly what it is, and that's as far as it goes.
The Honourable Member for Victoria Lakes on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during budget estimates on Monday, the Minister described, and might I say in great detail, the way her department conducted their organizational review of Talbot House. She indicated that the way they did the review was to talk to the Board of Directors and staff, and if necessary, they would talk to the people receiving the services. So, Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister. How many current residents did the Minister's department speak with during the course of their review? And if they didn't, why did her department deem it unnecessary?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
As I said before, Mr. Speaker, this entire issue is around an organizational review, and it's focused on the performance and whether they met the standards that were in the service agreement. And in fact, it's that group over there that wants to keep this going and harm the individuals involved. Now, the Board of Directors, the chair has actually reached out and asked for us to work together, which I, in fact, have said, yes, we would. So if they would stop their foolishness, people would be able to work together.
No. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not even going to bother respond to that accusation. But you think, Mr. Speaker, if a department was doing an organizational review on a facility to see whether or not the programs are being delivered right, what better way to find out than to talk to the residents that are in Talbot House today? Mr. Speaker, some have said that the department purposely did not meet with individual residents of Talbot House, Mr. Speaker. This is because many feel that the department only want to hear bad things about the organization. The mishandling of this situation, Mr. Speaker, is shameful. The minister claims that the review was strictly an organizational review, yet the report shows evidence of an attack on Father Abbas. The minister says she'll work with the board to help Talbot House get back on its feet after she pushed them down, but her department has announced they'll be putting out a request for proposals. So my question to the minister, will the minister apologize today to the board for the gross incompetence and disrespect she has shown them?
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
The only disrespect that's been shown to anybody is that group over there trying to create an issue over an organizational review.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this week the Premier announced a panel that's going to review existing studies on the Yarmouth Ferry. I have a real fear that this is another thing where the government is going to deflect responsibility onto another group. That's a sincere fear I have. I hope I'm mistaken. But Mr. Speaker, for the sake of this question, I'll give this group and this process, the benefit of the doubt. When it comes to the word viability that this group will be looking at, can the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism tell us, are they only looking at the ferry service itself and its ability to make money for its owners, or are they going to look at the economic impact that a government investment will have for the area in a ferry?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
You're going to look at the business case? Is that what you're asking?
Thank you.
For a business?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the panel. And one of the things that I want to make very, very clear, it is not another study. What it is doing, it's conducting a review. It's going to review all of the information, all of the data that's been put forward by a number of different individuals and organizations. There have been a lot of pros and cons, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Yarmouth Ferry. This is certainly going to look at the business case. It's going to look at the viability of the ferry, Mr. Speaker. We are heading this panel is going to be guided by a group of experts, ferry experts, Mr. Speaker, from Dalhousie University, and we hope that they will provide everyone with the answers that we all seek, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth and his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the challenge here is that we're on the cusp of another tourism season without that vital sea link to the largest tourism market in the world. There's still no timeline on what this panel is going to do or when they're going to complete their work by, and there's no clarification on what the mandate of this group is when it comes to examining the viability. My hope would be that they look at the economic impact that service has on the tourism sector, on businesses across the province. And there's another challenge, because yesterday the Minister of Economic and Rural Development said there is no money in the provincial budget to support a restored ferry service. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, if the panel does say that an investment in a ferry is needed, where will the money come from?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know very well what I said yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and what I said is that we did not put any money in the budget for something that doesn't exist. And Mr. Speaker, I will say further is that and we don't know what this panel is going to say, but one of the things that I've said repeatedly is that this requires a partnership and involvement by more than just the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we would look for, and do you know what, if we're going to invest in a ferry, we would think that the appropriate partners are going to be there alongside of us, number one. Number two is that there's a solid, viable business case for the installation of a ferry, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth and his final supplementary.
We still don't know what this word viability means or how it's going to be interpreted by the panel. That is a problem. The minister has said there's no money allocated for a restored ferry service. Well, if you're putting a panel in place to look at this, and one of the conclusions that they're going to come up with is either it's not worth it or it is. If they decide that it is, where will the money come from, and how much is this government willing to put into it?
The Honourable Member, Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, a business case is a business case as far as money is concerned, and I don't know why the member doesn't understand. What I've said, and what I've said repeatedly, is that when we look at investments, we look to see who's at the table with us. Mr. Speaker, we've said, we tried with the Yarmouth Ferry to have involvement from the federal government. The federal government said no. Mr. Speaker, we asked the governments in the U.S., would you be involved with funding for the Yarmouth Ferry? Mr. Speaker, they said no.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth on a new question.
I really want to continue that last one, but I guess we have to move on. Mr. Speaker, in 2009, once Southwest Nova lost the ferry and the government realized the economic damage that was going to happen, this minister put in place and invested over $500,000 into a Team West and Team Southwest, whose purpose was to reinvigorate the economy of Southwest Nova Scotia. My question is to the Premier, what have they been doing?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll do him a favor and give him to the Minister of ERDT.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government has made huge investments in the Southwest region, Mr. Speaker, and I think, and not in any way a priority list, but certainly at the top of the list, has to be the $50 million that we invested in Bowater to save thousands of jobs along the Southwest region, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also would like to mention the investment that we made in things like the 250th anniversary for Yarmouth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we made an investment in the hockey challenge, the Junior A hockey challenge, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we had made numerous investments, Mr. Speaker, in the Southwest region, and we have worked with organizations and individuals in the Southwest regions, which we will continue to do.
Honourable Member for Yarmouth on his first supplementary.
Okay, just to clarify, my question is specifically with the over $500,000, I think it was $600,000 that went to Team West or Team Southwest. What did those groups do for the economy of southwestern Nova Scotia? Have we seen a report on what the returns to taxpayers were who put money into those things? What's going on? We haven't heard anything from those two groups in 3 years, Mr. Speaker. I'm giving the minister an opportunity to provide this House with a very clear and direct report on the activities of Team West and Team Southwest, and to explain to us what happened to that $600,000 that was put into them.
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Team West, Team Southwest, all those organizations that were formed in the Southwest region were formed in partnership with ACOA, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will be getting for the last Team West. We are awaiting audited reports on just how the money was spent. We do know that there was some money. We do know, Mr. Speaker, that there was some money that was left over from those various initiatives. We know that in some cases we received written requests if that money could be used for other things, and we have denied them. We have track records, and what we don't have records of, Mr. Speaker, we will be receiving them.
The honourable member for Yarmouth on his final supplementary.
It's a bit disconcerting to me that the minister doesn't know what these groups did for the economy of southwestern Nova Scotia. They were put in place to help. They received significant funds, and nobody knows what has happened. Will the minister please table in this House any evidence he has, any data on the work that these groups have done on behalf of the citizens of southwest Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, as Minister, I would be more than pleased to table all information when it becomes available to all members of this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will even go so far as to elaborate on that list, because I will include the $1 million that we invested in RIDE, Mr. Speaker. I will include all those other investments that we made in the Southwest region to enable the Southwest region to be all that it can be, and then some, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our legacy with respect to the Southwest region.
Order, please. Time allotted for all questions put by members has elapsed. I will now recognize the Honourable House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that you now call Bill number 42, the Rural Nova Scotia Physicians Act, for second reading.
Bill number 42, the Rural Nova Scotia Physicians Act. I will now recognize the Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pleased to rise in my place today and to debate Bill number 42, the Rural Nova Scotia Physicians Act. And today I also asked a question of the Minister about the need for family physicians, and especially in rural Nova Scotia. We know that the need is extensive, and I just will start off by, I guess, reiterating that kind of need that there is around rural Nova Scotia. Currently, there are over 60,000 Nova Scotians who don't have a family doctor. And while we know that the model of healthcare delivery is in change, it's in a transitioning period, and perhaps in many regards quite a transformation period. But I know in speaking recently with Dr. Tom Mary, head of the Down Medical School, you know, I asked him if he and his colleagues across the country, you know, are seeing any change in actually around the need for, you know, every Canadian to have a family physician. And that is still the goal, and that is still the staple and the basis of good primary health care delivery. So that remains an elusive goal in Nova Scotia when we have the number of people who currently without a family physician. When we take a look at communities like Chester, Bridgewater, Lunenburg, Tuscott, Argyll, Pubnico, Barrington, Digby, Lockport, Yarmouth, Annapolis Royal, Bridgetown, Kentville and area, Kingston, Greenwood, Middleton, Berwick, Wolfville, 2 physicians in Pictou County, physician in Richmond County, Cape Breton and Arishat, Guysborough County. So, you know, we do have a very identified need for more family physicians. Now, as the Minister rightly points out, you know, we in Nova Scotia are very fortunate to have the highest number of physicians per capita. But that's also, you know, very misleading and not that comforting for the many Nova Scotians without a family doctor. And when it comes to those kind of numbers of 231 doctors per 100,000 population, you know, we need to realize some of the people who are registered to practice may actually not be actively practicing. With a world-class med school and an active research community, quickly the numbers, of course, change. I know of several doctors in Nova Scotia who spend half a year here and half a year in another community. You know, again, that skews the kind of numbers, you know, around 231 per 100,000. And of course, as we all know in our province, it is actually the distribution of the doctors, as outlined by a number of communities that are in need, that in fact is our central problem. And again, hopefully we're going to see that change. And this bill would assist greatly in addressing this maldistribution. And we need to find ways to have young physicians, new physicians, take a look at not just family medicine, but also family medicine being practiced in our rural communities. And there are a number of initiatives that have actually borne fruit across the country and in fact across North America. So I'd like, you know, to see that perhaps we need an array of initiatives, not just one. So I'm going to talk about 3 today. One that I think would work, again, in rural Nova Scotia, as well as it worked in Northern Ontario. And Northern Ontario and its mining communities, you know, we're again experiencing difficulty in attracting doctors and certainly retaining doctors that went to those communities. So they identified students from these northern communities that were finishing their basic science degree and applying for med school. They looked at it right at that early stage where they were applying for med school. And they were to provide you know, economic incentives towards their med school education for coming back to their communities. Now again, these were young Northern Ontario students who knew the nature of the communities that they were coming back to, and they were prepared to make such a commitment. And I looked at one of those studies, actually done by a young doctor in Nova Scotia during his med school years, and he was looking at the concepts of recruitment, retention. And this was a study based on the Northern Ontario experience that he passed on to me some time ago. Today in our bill, we're talking about a clerkship program. And again, this is not new. This has been in practice in Minnesota, for example, for about 40 years. And the program enables a med school to spend an extended period of time in their 3rd year in a rural community. Most programs are 36 weeks in duration. Well, the Dow Med School has started down this path. They have 3 students this year in New Brunswick who are there under the clerkship program. And so basically, they are not at the med school site at Dalhousie. They are in a community under the mentorship, working with a family doctor, perhaps in a collaborative practice. And these students in their 3rd year, they'll be rotating around a number of facilities. And this program enables the student to spend most of their academic year helping patients in one community. Now, this concept of the clerkship as well is not just unique to Minnesota. Again, in the med school in Alberta has used this in northern communities of Alberta. And again, the results are very, very encouraging. First of all, I think we need to say, you know, what are the benefits to a med student who is involved in a clerkship? And we know that during that 3rd year, they're going to gain a real sense of the type of medicine that is practiced by a family physician in a rural community. And very often, they have a much greater range of practice, of procedures, and a variety of patients, you know, from the day old to the 100-plus year old patient that they would be seeing. So it's a great diversity. They get to see patients, of course, over a longer period of time. They get to build a relationship with a number of specialists and physicians in a community. And in fact, most of all, they get a real good sense of the nature of that community. And I know this is kind of the idea that a number of communities, again, have tried to use that kind of process in attracting and recruiting doctors to their communities, where they'll have a doctor come in for 4 or 5 days, spend time with the local medical community, visiting the hospital that they may have visiting privileges in, and again, you know, seeing the kind of community, investigating the schools, and so forth. So this, however, in a clerkship, is for an entire year. And I think the results speak for themselves. The University of Minnesota, in looking at its 40-year history of the program, it says that 60 to 70% of the students that go through the program choose family medicine after graduation, and about 1/2 of these end up establishing a practice in a rural area. So obviously it has you know, very, very good results. The Canadian experience is probably not quite as strong, and perhaps that could be, again, the nature of the small, isolated northern communities of Alberta, where this practice has been going for about 13 years. And in the 13 years, the short-term stats show a similar trend with 35 to 50%, 30 to 35% of the graduates choosing family medicine. And of those that do choose family medicine, 50% go back to the community where they practiced in their clerkship. So you know, this is a real winning formula that you know, has been used in the United States, now in Canada, and Dal is starting down the road. It's in its infancy of developing such a program. And as Dal develops this program, I think it's absolutely critical. It's imperative for our province to be at the table with Dalhousie and work out whether it's, again, most likely a cost-shared arrangement to have these students be in a clerkship and be in these communities for that period of time. So, and I think it's vitally important to see this program as a recruitment tool for communities looking to recruit a family physician. We also know that the model used by the military across Canada has worked very, very well for them, where they identify a student in med school who also has an interest in a Canadian Armed Forces career, whether it be, you know, a short or a long-term period. They've had no problem by providing, again, tuition support, looking after those candidates financially, and then having them practice in a Canadian Armed Forces base for a period of 3 to 5 years, I think, is the common practice that we would see. So I think as we look at an array of possibilities, you know, in chatting just very recently about the clerkship program, it reminds me a little bit of I guess, a program growing up in rural Newfoundland, where the cottage hospital was the mainstay in the little outport communities, and they would, again, work on attracting young doctors to come to those communities, experience them for a period of time, especially in a role during the summer months, And in many ways, it was kind of those first attempts at recruitment, because, again, it would be not for every young med school to look at going to Lewisport or Twillingate or Buren or any of the small communities around Newfoundland. So I think as we continue to struggle in Nova Scotia, and I think it's important that Nova Scotians do know that there are 60,000 of us who don't have a family doctor. And I think whatever constructive solutions that we can offer through legislation, through discussion and dialogue with the Down Med School, ways to get the new crop of doctors over the next while into our rural communities, it will indeed be a great asset. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to speak to this piece of opposition business today, the Rural Nova Scotia Physicians Act. The Act certainly has a lot of interesting statements in it, but it proposes a very simple answer to what is really a very complex problem. And at the core of this issue, we all agree, is access to primary care. And we all know that Nova Scotians want and deserve medical attention where and when they need it, Madam Speaker. And I want to point out that our government has a number of initiatives in place to ensure that access to primary care is available to all Nova Scotians. In terms of doctors, the Department of Health and Wellness has a number of incentive programs already in place to recruit and to retain rural physicians. The recruitment and retention of physicians in rural areas of our province continues to be very much a priority of this government, Madam Speaker. And to support physician recruitment, the province offers financial support for site visits for physicians considering working in a rural area. These doctors can also access financial support to help with the relocation costs once they decide to work in a specific rural community. The province also provides debt assistance and return of service agreements to doctors who are willing and interested in practicing in rural communities. And Madam Speaker, I want to take this time while I'm chatting about this bill to talk about all of the positive things that are happening in Queens, my riding, Madam Speaker. And there are many good partnerships that are working to help create healthier and attractive communities for new doctors who are looking to set up practice in rural communities. I want to take this opportunity to speak to the Queen's General Hospital and some of the exciting initiatives that are happening there. Queen's General, for those members who aren't aware, is an acute care community hospital. It features 22 beds, combined medical and surgical units. It includes 3 concentrated nursing care beds, plus 2 telemetry units with full cardiac monitoring capability and a day surgery unit. Some of the services featured at the Queen's General Hospital would be a 24-hour outpatients emergency department. We have a wonderful lab. We have diagnostic imaging. I spoke of the day surgery and ambulatory care services available. We have EKG and general services and respiratory therapy, family practice. We house mental health and addiction services, just to name a few. What's happening that's new and exciting in Queens is the South Shore Health is preparing to issue its first tender call related to the new Queens General Healthcare Project. And this new healthcare project, Madam Speaker, features a new primary care clinic and a collaborative care center. This is exciting for Queens, and this has come about, Madam Speaker, from the partnership of many in community, including our physicians, Madam Speaker. The Queens General Health Project will not only feature the new primary care clinic, as I mentioned, but it will also feature the redevelopment of those 22-bed inpatient units at the hospital. Madam Speaker, this new clinic and collaborative care centre will certainly enhance the health services for the community, and also it will offer better experiences and patient care for clients and patients in the hospital. But it will also, Madam Speaker, improve the work environment for staff and physicians, and that's very important to our docs in the area. We want to make sure that they do have not only enhanced services, but also a really well-rounded work environment. So our community is really supporting efforts to recruit and retain health professionals now and well into the future, Madam Speaker. This new initiative, as I mentioned earlier, has been transpiring over many years, and this build really is a result of many years of work from the South Shore Regional Health Board and many community partners. Also, the region of Queens and the province has been very much involved with this new build. I want to tell you, Madam Speaker, that the Queens General Health Project has a total budget of over $16 million. $11 million of that budget has come from our Queens Foundation and from private donors, Madam Speaker. The province has invested $2.5 million into that new build. And the region of Queens, they have committed $1 million to the project. And a fundraising committee has been struck recently, consisting of volunteer members in our community, and they have been tasked with raising the remaining $1.5 million for this new primary care clinic, Madam Speaker. So I want to tell you that the importance of these partnerships are really key in attracting and retaining new doctors to rural communities. I want to talk about a very other important and great initiative happening in Queens. We have the North Queens Medical Care Centre in Caledonia, Madam Speaker, and the North Queens Medical Centre Association was formed in the mid-'80s to address a concern after a physician, the only physician in North Queens at the time, was retiring, Madam Speaker. So the North Queens Medical Centre Association was formed, and they decided that they had a real challenge on their hands in terms of recruiting a doctor to that particular rural community. And so what they set out to do was to form a partnership, to come together and create a space that would be attractive for a doctor wishing to set up a new practice in the area. The province at the time donated an old liquor store, Madam Speaker, and there was a trailer, a double trailer that sat on that land next to this old liquor store. So the province donated not only the building, but they also donated the land. The community then came together and with some assistance from the region of Queens and also Bowater Mersey at the time, they were able to create an attractive space, a small space, but a very attractive space. And they were able to attract the first salaried physician in Nova Scotia in 1990. So that was quite an accomplishment then for a rural community that was challenged with looking for a rural doctor, Madam Speaker. Then in 1999, the North Queens Medical Centre Association, they decided to respond to an invitation to submit a letter of intent for the Strengthening Primary Care Initiative. And this was an initiative which was a joint initiative from both the federal and provincial governments at the time. The North Queens Association, they took up the challenge, and not only did they attract the first nurse practitioner and staff to work in this new collaborative practice, but they also took on the challenge of creating a bigger space. And out of that project and community work, they decided to build a new facility, Madam Speaker. And this new facility in North Queens is second to none, and we actually brag about it all across this country. The light has been shone on the community of North Queens and our wonderful medical center. And that medical center is a classic example of a community recognizing a need and working together to meet that need, Madam Speaker. Today, the North Queens Community Health Center serves as a model, as I just mentioned. It offers effective delivery of primary health care in a rural community, and today, we have 2 full-time physicians and a full-time nurse practitioner, Madam Speaker. We get visits at the North Queens Health Center from pediatricians, from addiction services, mental health services, and there's diabetes education that is offered at that medical clinic as well. So we're very proud to talk about our successes in Queens when it comes to recruiting and retaining new docs. And I just want to mention some of our new docs. I want to give them kudos for all of the great work that they do in Queens and continue to do in terms of serving the needs of residents, looking after our healthcare needs. I want to make mention and give kudos to Dr. Andrew Blackadar, to Dr. Sarah Kosh, to Dr. Kim Crawford, to Dr. Al Doucette, who works as well with South Shore Health. I want to reach out and say thank you to Dr. Gary Ernest, Dr. David Gunn, Dr. Jennifer McDonald, Dr. Nora Mogan, Dr. Gary Morash, Dr. James Rafferty in Caledonia, Dr. Susan Thorne, Dr. Tim Woodford, happens to be my physician, a very great doc, and Renata Bennett, who is our nurse practitioner in Caledonia. These docs, they come together at weekly meetings. They partnership not only with the South Shore Regional Health Board, Madam Speaker, but with other community partners such as the Queens Community Health Board, Madam Speaker. And the Queens Community Health Board really is the ears and the eyes of the community in Queens, and they service not only Queens County but also parts of Lunenburg County as well. There are 15 volunteers, Madam Speaker, on our Queens Community Health Board, and they really are a true partner when they come to the table to address community health care needs, and they are a resource and a support for new docs who are looking to set up practice in rural communities such as Queens. Just in the last 2 years, the Queens Community Health Board, which receives funding through the South Shore Regional Health Board, they distributed $15,000 in grants, Madam Speaker, to organizations such as the Queens Fitness Center. There is an incentive there for residents who are interested in bettering their health to have coupons, if you will, to enable them to join the Queens Fitness Center and get some mentorship for good, healthy exercise regimes. And that program was also partnered with some of our family docs in Queens. They've contributed to the Well Women's Day Committee, the Kiwanis Club for the Child and Child Resource Fair, and also Skate for Health programs. Another very important partner to help us retain docs in rural communities such as Queens is the Queens General Hospital Auxiliary. And Madam Speaker, our auxiliary in Queens is a very important and key partner. A group of many dedicated volunteers who work to improve patient comfort and care, Madam Speaker. Some of those members, they work in the gift shop, they work with organizing our Queen's Hospital Hustle. They raise many funds for the hospital, Madam Speaker, and over the last several years, they have donated in excess of $150,000 to the hospital for a number of initiatives. Our acute comfort room, Madam Speaker, much equipment has been purchased for the operating room construction project. They have purchased for the hospital and for our doctors that work tirelessly at the Queen's General. They have purchased a trauma stretcher, a space lab monitor, wheelchairs with IV poles, Madam Speaker, flexible scopes, stretcher chairs, blood pressure cups. These are the sorts of pieces of equipment that the auxiliary has worked hard to fundraise for, all in support of our doctors in rural communities. So I want to conclude by saying that this government is very focused on retaining and attracting doctors to rural communities. And I want to say that I want to again shine the light on what's happening in Queens. It's a good example of how partnerships do work. Not only have Queens doctors partnered with community volunteers and community organizations, but they have partnered very successfully with the province, Madam Speaker, and this government. And this government certainly knows all of the great work that's been happening in Queens, Madam Speaker. It's been my pleasure speaking to this bill.
Thank you. Now recognize the honourable member for Argyle.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Il me fait grand plaisir de parler ce soir sur ce projet de loi. It's my pleasure to stand this evening and speak to this bill that has been introduced by the Liberal caucus. You know, many of us represent wonderful rural areas, and I thank the member for Queens for her discussion, her interest, of course, in her community and the great things that are happening. And Madam Speaker, I can tell you there's lots of great things happening around Nova Scotia because of the, I believe, tenacity and, you know, smartness of our rural areas. I think it's absolutely phenomenal to see the creativity that comes in our communities in trying to find ways to get doctors to come to their area. Because I can tell you, and I've seen it in rural Nova Scotia and in other areas, that of course rural communities can be transformed. When a doctor comes to town and hangs up that shingle on Main Street, they attach, you know, this is so important to attracting, of course, people to those communities to visit, to shop, to do all those other things. It actually transforms an area. And I can tell you that this doesn't happen very often anymore. You know, this is a province that is largely a province of small towns. Rural communities are going to survive and thrive. They'll, of course, depend on the access to a highly qualified, sustainable, and responsive healthcare system. You know, Madam Speaker, the thing is, and even as my time as minister, and we use these stats an awful lot, is that, you know, there's a higher average of doctors in Nova Scotia per population than any other province in Canada. You know, the average in Canada is 201 doctors per 100,000 souls. In Nova Scotia, that number is 231 per 100,000 souls. On the face, you'd look at that and go, well, that's pretty good. We should just sort of maybe stop there. We're doing better than the national average. Well, the problem we have is that all those doctors, or the vast majority of those doctors, are based right here in Halifax or in HRM. And why is that? Well, this is where the teaching area is. This is where the research area is. This is where, you know, a lot of what I would qualify as research doctors end up. This is very attractive to those individuals. They, of course, want to work on trials. They want to work on, you know, some good research and development of different drugs or different services or different procedures. And, of course, this is where they end up. So the gap that we have is, of course, the family doctor gap of trying to find those very basic services that are required in the area. You know, a family doctor, I guess, is what you would call a do-all. They have to have a good base knowledge in medical care, so that when individuals come to their practices, that they can be diagnosed, whether they can get a drug therapy, whether they need to go on to see a specialist or what have you. These are, I believe, the new specialists, because they've got to know so much. Gone is the day, I guess, when everybody sort of wanted to be a heart doctor or wanted to be some kind of surgeon. Today, you know, if you have that broad base of knowledge, a family doctor is a phenomenal profession for you to do. But the shortages are rampant across this province. You know, 9.4 family doctors are needed on the South Shore. And in a recent Chronicle Herald article, Dr. Tom Mary, the Dean of Medicine, Dalhousie University, was saying Southwest Nova Scotia is worse than other parts of the province when it comes to access to family doctors. So, okay, well, if that's happening, we have identified it. Why do we not see necessarily anything happening? What's being provided here or proposed by the Liberal caucus, I think, is one that warrants further study. Is it the only thing that we should be doing? Well, absolutely not. There's lots of other great things that we should be doing to entice these individuals. Many times I said as minister, and I know that the leader of the Liberal Party at the time was looking at ways to entice local individuals to get them through the service, to bring them into the med school, bring them through their time by designating seats in the medical school. Well, I can tell you that since my time as minister, and of course working in that minority government where I did get the opportunity to just chat on many occasions with the leader of the Liberal Party, we did have a couple of opportunities there. We did put a number of seats in there. But we're only now, you know, by the time you go through that process, you would only now start to see the result of that as these individuals start to graduate from the med school. You know, is it working? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I guess time will tell whether, of course, that effort will come to fruition. Madam Speaker, what we do need to see is a continual eye on that process. Let's not forget that when St. John, UNB, opened up their med school in St. John, a number of students left the Dal Med School here to go off to be able to go to school closer to home. So that opened up a number of seats here in Halifax at Dal Med School, which this government could have taken and said, okay, since there's now these seats that are available, let's take them in and designate them to expand that family med, that rural family med for Nova Scotian students. Or at the best, for students that are interested in practicing here in Nova Scotia. But Madam Speaker, that didn't happen. They allowed those seats to be taken up by other countries in the world. Actually, as far as I know, as a Middle Eastern country that took over some of those seats, and now we're actually training doctors for many parts of the world. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, because I think other parts of the world need doctors too. We're sort of competing in this global market that makes it difficult. But heck, why wouldn't we have looked at some of those seats to continue to nurture our local students, to nurture our local folks, to bring them through a process or a service that not only helps them, but helps our communities grow and thrive, of course, when we need to have that kind of service. You know, family doctors, you know, in my mind, and this is because I've witnessed what happens to communities when we start to lose these kinds of professionals. Of course, in the Yarmouth area, not just in Yarmouth town itself, but also in the municipality of Argyll and around, as doctors seem to be moving in and out all the time, is that it's the community capital that we end up losing as well, because these individuals not only are specialists in their field of medicine, they're also, I would qualify as specialists in our communities. They are the individuals that, even though they don't seem to have any time for anything, are the ones who belong to the service clubs. They're the ones that seem to be volunteering their times over and above what is required, of course, of them. And in communities like ours that are continuing to see declining populations, these people are worth gold. They're worth gold because they can come in with a fresh look. They can come in and provide that community capital that, of course, that we need more than ever. You know, the member for Kings West was talking about the gaps that we're seeing in different parts of the province. Of course, I talked about the 9.4 family doctors we need in South Shore. Well, it'd be nice to have a plan for those. What are we going to do? But what's going to happen is the South Shore is going to compete against Tri-County, and Tri-County is going to compete against Valley, and Valley is going to compete against Truro. And in the end, somebody might end up being the winner, but that's not how the game should be played. That's not how the game should be played at all. There should be what I would say a good strategy in saying, okay, listen, here's the next availables. You know, what happens here in Halifax in physician recruitment is that they try to sell the whole province, and I don't dispute that's kind of the right thing to do, is they sell it as a whole. So they bring, of course, doctors in from other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and then of course it depends on what kind of offer comes up from those rural areas on where these people end up being placed. You know, Valley's looking for 4 family physicians right now. So is Valley going to be fighting against South Shore? And that will continue to happen while there is no real strategy for the placement of these individuals or the strategy of developing these specialists, these family doctor specialists across our province. You know, Soldiers Memorial looking for an ER specialist. Cape Breton is continuing to look for 2 family doctors in Glace Bay. New Waterford looking for ER physicians in Glace Bay, New Waterford, North Sydney, and Sydney. Specialists for the Cape Breton Regional Hospital. I mean, Hansport's been looking for a family physician, I don't know, for a really long time. And a matter of fact, I mean, thank goodness for the work of that nurse practitioner who has taken up a lot of slack for that community. But that community has a history of having a family doctor there for a long time. Why don't we work to make sure that Hansport has one, like many other communities in Nova Scotia? What's being provided here by the Liberal Party, the Liberal caucus, like I said, has some merit. But the problem I see with it is this, and this is from personal experience in talking to a lot of people that have had to go away for their medical school training. So we will qualify them as, even though they're Nova Scotians, they're international students. And what happens is that if those individuals are interested in coming back home, and I've seen this on a number of occasions now, they of course have to make application through Dal Med School, because Dal actually holds, I guess you would qualify it, the rights to many of the clerkships, many of the practicums, and all those things. So you sort of have to find your way through Dalhousie. And they're tending to be a bit of a block for that, because of course they're working to make sure that their students have placements across the system. So I think it'd be sort of maybe an additional move. I don't know if it's a better move than what's being proposed here, but at least an additional move to work with the med school to make sure that they welcome with open arms those individuals who have had to go outside to get their training, whether they've gone to Saba, whether they've gone to Hungary, whether they've gone, I mean, I don't know where they end up, but boy, it seems to be all over the world that people have ended up going for their medical training, who still having their connection to here, I think is important. You know, we want to bring them in and continue to train them in our style of medicine, you know, in a North American style of medicine, in the Canadian style of medicine. And I think that would be a tremendous opportunity for our rural areas in order to make sure that they fill the gaps that they're seeing across Nova Scotia. Many times, I think the department works, in concert with the Department of Education, with other organizations. I know it's an issue of which silo are you going to be working in, but I think as long as you bring them together, I think we can find better ways, whether it is the student loan relief, but even better, beyond the student loan relief, but it is trying to find dollars to put in hands of these individuals so that they can continue. Sometimes it's not good enough to just have those dollars at the end of it. I mean, these are, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars that these students have to incur to complete their training. So why don't we try to find some dollars up front? And that, I think, is where the coordination needs to come from. Because again, like I said, what's happening is that different areas are competing against each other, and I think sometimes defeating each other when it comes to the availability of a family doc. And I think the province, again, would be better served to find a more strategic way, a more centralized way to get these doctors spread out across the province where we need them, so that they don't necessarily congregate in one area. Whether even is some kind of return for service or what it might be, I think could be left to the department. But there are good people in that department, and maybe this kind of bill would supplement that. I think that this needs to be researched just furthermore, but I think we need to do some hard work here in the legislature to make sure that the tools are available for Nova Scotian communities.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Kings North on an introduction.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to just draw the attention of the members of the House to the East Gallery. My friend Don Fraser is alone up there this afternoon. Don is a resident of Kentville. He has run a law practice in the community for a long time. He's been a very active participant in the political process for probably all of his adult life. He's been a candidate for the NDP on more than one occasion, both provincially and federally. And he's currently a very important person in my life as not only my friend, but as the president of my riding association. So I welcome Don to the House, and I know that everybody will give you a warm welcome.
Thank you, and I welcome our guests to the gallery today. Hope you enjoyed today's proceedings. I would now recognize the honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks so much. This is a very important issue for my constituency, as I know it is for many areas across the province. Nova Scotia is fortunate to have the highest number of physicians per capita in this province. 231 doctors, I believe, per 100,000 people. However, Madam Speaker, the number is a bit misleading. One, because some of the people who are registered to practice may actually not be practicing. With such a great world-class university and med school in Dalhousie, a lot of those folks are engaged in research and not necessarily out in the field practicing family medicine. But even more importantly, Madam Chair, that there seems to be a maldistribution of the doctors in the province. I know there are a lot of areas that are in desperate need of family physicians, mine being one of them. I think overall there's about 60,000 Nova Scotians that we know do not have a family physician. That is a problem because we know having access to a family physician is a necessary component to a healthy life. Right. To stay up on how your body's working and to be able to identify when things aren't working as they should be. Yep. And I think the goal of all of us here should be to ensure that every Nova Scotian, any person here in the province has access to a family physician. Otherwise, we're really not fulfilling that mandate to the citizens of this province. I know I tabled a petition in this House which had, I believe, over 2,300 names solely from Yarmouth, and that was just collecting names for a few weeks. Only from Yarmouth County, folks that didn't have a family physician. It's a big number. I know I get a lot of calls in my office. People are always looking for family physicians. And the other problem that having a lack of family physicians causes is that there's undue stress put on to our ERs. Yep. The Yarmouth ER in particular, we have a few great physicians and a great staff there. but the demand that's placed on them is very extreme in a lot of cases. A lot of seniors are forced to go to RER just to get prescriptions filled out, and they end up waiting because of the triage system, up to 14, sometimes 19 hours. I've heard. We have, seniors sometimes who are ill who are waiting in RERs for that long. I think is a terrible thing. And I know for those folks, it doesn't seem they're getting better care sooner. That's for sure. This idea hopefully will help us in addressing this issue of recruiting physicians to rural communities in Nova Scotia that are without enough physicians, that don't have enough physicians to supply the demand that's there. By allowing med students the opportunity to go throughout our province and actually do work in rural hospitals, high-need hospitals, I think it provides some very, very real and good opportunities for those students. One, they'll get to see how those rural hospitals work, obviously, and function. But I think even sometimes more importantly, they'll be able to develop some key relationships at that institution and some key relationships in those communities that are in high need. And we know that relationships matter when people are deciding where they want to live, where they want to work. Of course. And oftentimes it's the connections that people make which decide where they're going to go next. It's going to be the doctors that have been practicing for a while that influence these med students on where they want to practice. So if someone's practicing in Yarmouth and gets to learn from the great doctors we have in Yarmouth, I think there's more of a likelihood that they will consider Yarmouth as a potential place to work, live, and bring up their family if they so choose to. Whereas if they're going to have mentors here in the city, they're more likely to stay here. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we have so many doctors in the city and why we don't have a lot of doctors in rural communities. I think it's worth noting that the incentive programs to recruit family physicians to high-need areas, to rural areas, haven't been reviewed, I think, in approximately 12 years. I could be mistaken there. I think it is time that we look at how we're recruiting needed family physicians to our rural areas and come up with some new innovative ideas to do that. I think this can be one. Minnesota has been doing this for a while, I think, and for about 40 years, actually, Madam Speaker. Minnesota's been doing this for about 40 years, and they've had some significant success in keeping doctors in areas that are in high demand of doctors. The University of Minnesota, I think, was the first school in North America to offer a program that we're proposing here. And 60 to 70% of their students that went through the program chose family medicine after graduation. And furthermore, about half of those graduates ended up establishing a practice in a rural area. Those are pretty significant results when you consider the limited amount of resources that would need to go into this. And so I hope this is a program that the government does consider, because I know it's needed. We have a lot of areas in the province that are in high need of family physicians, and I'll list them. And the folks that live in these areas know, because they're experiencing this. Chester, Bridgewater, Lunenburg. There's vacancies in Tuscott, Argyll, and Pubnico. Vacancies in Barrington. There's in need of family physicians in Digby. There's vacancies in Lockport. There's vacancies in Yarmouth. And as I mentioned, I tabled a petition with over 2,300 names of people collected in a couple weeks that don't have a family physician in Yarmouth. And it's one of the issues that I probably hear the most about in my constituency office, is the need for a family physician. They're looking for family physicians in Annapolis, Royal, Bridgetown, Kentville, an area, Kingston and Greenwood, Middleton, Berwick, Wolfville, or Wolfville, as I know the Minister of Education likes to refer to it as. Physicians are needed in Pictou County, in Richmond County, Narrachat, and Guysborough County as well. We're all in need of physicians. I know the good member from Guysborough, Sheet Harbour, is well aware of the need for physicians in his area, as I am in mine. So is this the end to the equation to help us ensure that we have sufficient amount of doctors in rural areas? No, it's not, but I think it could be a good start. and an important component. Another issue, as the member for Argyle mentioned, is what happens with residency seats here. I know a lot of good Nova Scotians that have gone away to study medicine, and they're unable to come back and start their residency here and then practice. This recently happened in Yarmouth, where we thought we had a physician coming in who actually married my cousin, and so that's how big of an issue it is in Yarmouth. I'm now marrying off my family members, Madam Chair, to recruit doctors to our area. I'm just kidding. I didn't really marry her off. She chose her husband. But we had an opportunity in Yarmouth to recruit this gentleman who is a bright young fellow, and who was committed to coming to Yarmouth and working and being a family physician in Yarmouth. He wasn't able to get a residency seat here because of the red tape around coming back from overseas to practice here. And that's another issue that we're going to have to address at some point, because we're allowing Nova Scotians who are trained medical professionals who want to come back home, work as family physicians, and I know some that want to work in the high-need rural areas that we're talking about. They're unable to do that because of the red tape that surrounds this issue. But here, at least, we can start the ball rolling by encouraging our young up-and-coming medical professionals to train in rural areas, build relationships in those high-need areas, and hopefully, be influenced by mentors in those areas that will help encourage them to actually stay and practice. Because if we can do that, I think it'll be definitely a step in the right direction. Another idea that this party has floated, and it was an issue in the last provincial election that we pushed, was to fund med students, to provide funding for their very expensive tuition if they were willing to practice in rural high-need areas that were in need of family physicians. To date, that program that the Liberal caucus has suggested hasn't been accepted by this government, unfortunately. But that's another idea that I think is worth looking at for sure. We need to look at how we're going to recruit physicians to our high-need areas. Ontario does an incredible job with it. I think 10 years ago or more, Ontario had a huge issue with lack of family physicians in rural areas. They completely overhauled how they incentivize practicing in rural areas. And now rural communities in Ontario, I think, have some of the most competitive physicians who want to practice in rural Ontario have some of the most competitive salaries and incentive programs. And as I said, here in Nova Scotia, it's been 12 years, I think, since we've reviewed our incentive programs. Maybe this can be a first step into actually reviewing all the incentive programs we have in place to make sure that we are coming up with the most innovative, creative, and modern techniques to incentivize our med grads to practice family medicine in rural high-need areas. I know home, I've spoken to medical professionals. They're really feeling the brunt of this government's cuts to health care. I've heard from nurses. Some nurses who are now on 12-hour shifts don't even have access to coffee anymore to complete their shifts. I mean, that's how specific the health care cuts are affecting just the daily lives of our nurses and medical professionals. And the concern that's been expressed to me from nurses in particular in my area at the regional hospital in Yarmouth is that their ability to provide the vital services that they're supposed to is being jeopardized because of cuts to their resources. And so at a time when the government is slashing the health care budgets, we need to do a much better job at I guess thinking outside the box and figuring out how to address some of the shortcomings that we have in our healthcare system. And make no mistake, 60,000 Nova Scotians without a family physician is definitely a shortcoming in our healthcare system right now. And I know that not a party in this House want to see folks go without family physicians and with the medical care that they need. I know none of us want people to wait 19 hours in an emergency care facility before they're seen. But we have to be honest, some of the actions that we've been taking, that the government has been taking in terms of budgetary cuts, is being counterproductive to achieving those goals. This idea hopefully will allow us to at least address one of those, and that's the deficit of doctors in rural high-need areas. A lot of us members here, I know we all hear about this on a daily basis. We get calls about lack of family physicians. Unfortunately, I hear from families whose children don't have family physicians. It's a heartbreaking thing, but hopefully by looking at ideas like this, we can start to address that issue. And that's why I'm happy that on this opposition day, our caucus has presented this important piece of legislation. I hope the government considers it, because if you look at the results that have happened in other jurisdictions that have used this model, they have been pretty impressive. And I think that we can reach those results or better here in the province of Nova Scotia if we just think about things differently, do things differently, and we can start with this piece of legislation. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the Honourable House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 45 for second reading, the Ratepayer Protection Act?
Call Bill number 45, the Ratepayers Protection Act. I recognize the Honourable Member for Richmond and House Leader for the official opposition. It does.
Yeah, the pay's the same too. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to move second reading of Bill number 45, which was introduced on behalf of our caucus, and it is known as the Ratepayer Protection Act, which I certainly hope that the government will see fit to allow this bill to move to second reading and to allow it to go to Law Amendments Committee for consideration by Nova Scotians. What does this bill do? Madam Speaker, it would require that Nova Scotia Power conduct biannual performance and value for money audits, which will be made public. It will require them to publish estimated and actual costs on a regular basis. It will require Nova Scotia Power that any public settlement meetings require them to have public settlement meetings before any proposed general rate hike, and will prevent millions in executive bonuses and regulatory costs from being passed on to ratepayers. Madam Speaker, Nova Scotians are becoming very frustrated and as well confused by the operations of Nova Scotia Power. Earlier, I responded to the Premier's statement regarding government's efforts to restart the New Page mill. We'll recall at the time that once it was announced that New Page would close, Nova Scotia Power turned around and said, every Nova Scotia ratepayer is going to have to pay more because New Page is closed. So that created a panic in itself. So we had the head of Nova Scotia Power telling us that, and lo and behold, just a few months later, the head of Nova Scotia Power was out trying to calm everyone's fears by saying that the closure of New Page actually had absolutely no effect on the company. So Nova Scotians are clearly looking for better direction. Madam Speaker, over the last 10 years, electricity rates have increased 7 times. And now Nova Scotia Power has sought another large increase on the backs of consumers. We have seen power rates increases dig deeper into the pockets of everyday Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians have faced down continued rate increases from Nova Scotia Power and added electricity taxes courtesy of NDP and Conservative governments. All of this, Madam Speaker, with no accountability. There's simply no more revenue for Nova Scotia Power to take from the people of this province. Increasing power rates mean increases in just about everything from food to property taxes. They are an attack on the standard of living of all Nova Scotians. That is why the Liberal caucus has introduced the Ratepayers Protection Act. This is just one step of many a Liberal government would take to ensure Nova Scotia Power is accountable to Nova Scotians. If passed, this bill will reduce power rates for Nova Scotians and will give all residents of our province and homeowners and businesses direct access to what their rates actually pay for. Nova Scotians and the province's business community are being pushed to the brink by already sky-high power rates and aren't able to withstand the further electricity increases being sought by Nova Scotia Power. As a province, we are becoming rapidly uncompetitive when compared to our neighbouring provinces. The NDP government's only answer has been to trump the removal of the HST from electricity bills. However, this did not benefit small business, and the continued rate increases certainly has removed any benefit experienced by Nova Scotians. Madam Speaker, it did not benefit mills like Newpage and Bowater. In fact, the NDP, in cooperation with the Tories, did everything they could to hurt those businesses when it came to power rates. For the NDP to keep talking about the HST removal as a solution is an insult to everyone in this province that runs a business. While the HST removal had no benefit to those mills, the Tories, while in government, proposed a new electricity tax, which mills like Newpage, along with every other electricity consumer in the province, from businesses to low-income families, would be forced to pay. The NDP, at the time, opposed that tax during the 2009 election, but promptly implemented it in their first session after becoming government with the support of the Tory caucus. They literally called it a Christmas gift to Nova Scotians. Instead of the Conservatives and NDP deciding that Nova Scotia Power shareholders should pay for efficiency costs, they decided low-income Nova Scotians and struggling businesses should bear the brunt of those costs. These increases stretch budgets, they put a strain on pocketbooks, and make doing business in Nova Scotia unaffordable. The last dozen years brought a series of Conservative and at least one NDP government that failed to stand up to Nova Scotia Power. Both the Conservatives and the NDP had the opportunity to rein in power rates that increased by 38% over the last 10 years. To date, both have failed to do so. Both the Conservatives and NDP had a chance to put an end to Nova Scotia Power executive bonuses. Both failed to do so. A Conservative government sat back and watched this problem grow while taking no action except proposing new taxes and implementing energy legislation without outlining the costs. The NDP, unfortunately for Nova Scotians, has only made it worse. Now the NDP wants you to believe they care about the pain Nova Scotians are in, and the Conservatives want you to believe that they care by proposing legislation based on principles Liberals have been talking about for 2 years, such as ending ratepayer-funded executive bonuses, and suggesting cost of renewable energy legislation should be outlined at the time of bill introduction when they didn't even do that themselves while in government. Our work begins with Nova Scotians knowing whether they're getting value for money, whether the parent company, Emera, is simply bleeding Nova Scotia Power dry. Madam Speaker, our belief is that profits from Nova Scotia Power should remain here in Nova Scotia. With Nova Scotians staring down the barrel of a 7th power rate hike in 10 years, Liberals have repeatedly asked the NDP government to order a performance and value audit of Nova Scotia Power and their operations. This kind of audit will identify if there are cost savings to be made internally at Nova Scotia Power. These savings could then offset rate increases Nova Scotia Power wants to force on ratepayers throughout the province. It's time we look inside the power monopoly in this province to see where there's fat to be cut before asking Nova Scotians to pay up again. The NDP government has no problem asking hospital workers and teachers to look internally for cuts, but they refuse to ask the same of Nova Scotia Power. Madam Speaker, this bill forces the issue on Nova Scotia Power. I hear it in my office every day. Nova Scotians are used to frequent increases in their power bills. They feel powerless as people, and the Conservatives included, try to convince them that settlement agreements brokered behind closed doors, such as the one reached last month, are a win for them. Madam Speaker, any deal reached in secret is not a win for Nova Scotians. Nova Scotia Power's continued pursuit of multi-year power rate hikes behind closed doors means Nova Scotians will pay more for electricity without ever seeing any real justification. Closed-door meetings are not the way a public utility operating in an effective monopoly should operate. The secrecy around these backroom negotiations can mean nothing positive for Nova Scotians already struggling with power bills, and it ends with this bill here. This legislation would require public settlement meetings to be held prior to appearing before the Utility and Review Board. If no settlement agreement can be reached between Nova Scotia Power and all of the stakeholders, than any costs associated with Utility and Review Board hearing and general rate application are to be borne by Nova Scotia Power shareholders, not ratepayers in this province. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, these costs are not to be passed on to ratepayers in any way. This is a direct saving to ratepayers whether or not a settlement is reached. Over the last 3 years, regulatory costs at the Utility and Review Board have totaled over $4 million. During that same time, Nova Scotia Power has spent nearly $15 million appearing before the board. Ensuring Nova Scotia Power and not Nova Scotians pay those bills will reduce the cost of electricity for every ratepayer in the province and certainly encourage the company to reach settlement agreements. Nova Scotia Power has ridden roughshod over ratepayers in Nova Scotia. The NDP government and previous Conservative governments have stood idly as power rates rose by 38% over 10 years. Madam Speaker, enough is enough. The people of Nova Scotia deserve a government that acts. It is clear the NDP government has no desire to act and rein in Nova Scotia Power. A Liberal government is prepared to take action on power issues, stabilizing rates, ensuring a diverse supply of clean energy, and making sure Nova Scotia Power's parent company, Emera, doesn't act like a pirate when it comes to ratepayers. The Ratepayer Protection Act offers clear solutions to combat Nova Scotia Power's inability to rein in its spending and its desire to continually pass on costs to Nova Scotians. It complements other legislation that's already been introduced on behalf of our caucus and begins a road towards a new level of accountability on energy issues. Merci.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's a great pleasure for me to rise here and to get the chance to say a few words about this ratepayers bill introduced by the Liberal Party in their newfound interest in ordinary Nova Scotians. Madam Speaker, we all know that energy costs are rising. We know that vulnerable Nova Scotian families and communities are struggling under the burden of high energy costs. We know that the costs of coal and other fossil fuels have risen dramatically over the last few years. Coal, for example, Madam Speaker, has increased by 75% in the last 5 years. The cost of electricity has increased by 33% over the last 7 years. 80% of our energy, Madam Speaker, comes from these imported fossil fuels. These are the facts, Madam Speaker. We know that energy costs are rising. They're rising here in Nova Scotia. They're rising all over the world. We know that the government of Nova Scotia has very little control over world energy costs. Unlike the Liberal Party, we also don't believe in sticking our heads in the sand when it comes to dealing with energy costs. We need real solutions, and we need real long-term solutions. Not just posturing, Madam Speaker. It's very easy to pick an organization and beat it up and create these straw men and say, look at the wonderful job we're doing. It takes a lot of hard work, Madam Speaker, to come up with real solutions. And they're clearly not willing to invest the energy in coming up with real solutions. We understand, Madam Speaker, that Nova Scotians feel vulnerable and threatened, and they're struggling under the burden of high energy costs. It's why we're trying, Madam Speaker, to wean ourselves away from fossil fuels. It's why, Madam Speaker, we remove the provincial portion of the HST on home energy. That was a real saving to Nova Scotians, Madam Speaker. It made a real difference for Nova Scotians. We provided the addition to the home heating assistance rebate. We provided through community services support for Nova Scotians on low income. Through Efficiency Nova Scotia, we dealt with reducing the demand and helping Nova Scotians reduce their demand for energy through improving their homes and coming up with low-cost insulation programs. And we came up with some of the most aggressive renewable energy targets in the world through our renewable electricity strategy, Madam Speaker. Our renewable electricity plan, Madam Speaker, mandates that by 2020, 40% of all the electricity generated in Nova Scotia will come from local and renewable sources. Those are real solutions, Madam Speaker. Those are solutions that answer to the real challenges faced by Nova Scotians. It helps them today, and it helps them in the future. I'd like to say a little bit more, Madam Speaker, about these long-term plans. The last time I rose in this place, Madam Speaker, I was talking about that African proverb, you know, that a society grows when old men and old women plant trees in whose shade only their children and grandchildren will sit. That's what a government is supposed to do, Madam Speaker, plan for the long term. And I'd like to say something about those long-term plans. Yes, Madam Speaker, the Conservatives believed in cutting down trees. They also believed in digging their heads in the sand, but those were not strategies, Madam Speaker.
Order.
No.
Order, please. Order. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know the truth hurts them, but sometimes they need to hear the truth in this House, Madam Speaker. Just take wind energy, for example. Take wind energy, Madam Speaker. I wish we could harness the wind energy that comes from that opposite side every day. We in this House, Madam Speaker, would be self-sufficient in energy if we can harness the wind that comes from the other side. But we're doing more than that, Madam Speaker. We're doing more than that. We've invested in wind energy. If you've been to Pictou County, for example, you've seen the DSNM, the manufacturing of wind turbines. In fact, 20% of our energy, Madam Speaker, today comes from wind energy, and we'd like to see more. And Churchill Falls, Madam Speaker, Muskrat Falls, the project, this great partnership that we forged with Newfoundland, and later on New Brunswick, and the Atlantic Province. It's going to save us a huge amount of energy down the road. They're asking about the cost, Madam Speaker. It's one of the great flaws of the Tory governments in the past, is that they haven't been able to look beyond their own noses. They haven't been able to look in front of their own immediate self-interest. We're looking down the road, and we know that down the road, this will provide a renewable, green, safe, secure, stable, local source of energy to Nova Scotians. And we might not benefit from that today, Madam Speaker, but I know our children and our grandchildren can be assured that they will have a safe, green, renewable, sustainable source of energy, and they should be happy for that. Similarly with the Fundy tides, Madam Speaker, we know that the Fundy tides provide the highest tides in the world. And we are actually trying to harness that energy. We know from our recent pilot projects that there's more energy than we even dreamed of in that. And harnessing that energy will give our children and our grandchildren the sustainable, green, inexpensive energy we are looking for. And solar energy, Madam Speaker. We're introducing initiatives for solar energy. The Liberal Party opposite is holding up a bill that will give the municipalities and give Nova Scotians the authority to invest in solar power, to create local jobs in there, dealing with energy. They should ask themselves, if they're so concerned about Nova Scotians, why are they not letting Nova Scotians invest in solar energy and do something that the municipalities themselves are asking for? And we've introduced community feed-in tariffs, Madam Speaker.
Order. Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island has the floor.
And we're expanding the use of natural gas as well, Madam Speaker. If I can get back,
Order, please. Order. Thank you. As interesting as the side chatter is, it's very difficult to hear the member. He should not have to strain his voice to be heard. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
I'm always happy to have their attention, Madam Speaker. And yes, we are expanding natural gas as well in Nova Scotia. To get to the specifics of the bill, Madam Speaker, the Liberal Party would like to pretend that somehow what they're proposing is going to be a better system. Really, what they're proposing instead is more bureaucracy, more layers of decision-making, more costs that we put on to the tax of the. The member from Yarmouth would like me to explain that. Well, I'd like to cite the Utility and Review Board decision of November 29th, 2011. And responding precisely to the Liberal proposal says that NSBI has gone through a number of audits, very expensive audits, and those audits, the cost of those audits have been passed on, and the Liberal Party would like to do more. What the decision says is, and this is one of the findings, the costs of such reviews ordered by the board must ultimately be recovered from the taxpayer, from the ratepayers. According to the board, accordingly, the board is very conscious that it should only order such reviews or audits when absolutely necessary for the protection of the ratepayers. And I'll table that, Madam Speaker. The decision that they're talking about executive compensation, the government party resisted that, Madam Speaker, and in the 2012 settlement agreement, they removed executive bonuses and reduced the allowable rate of return. So in short, Madam Speaker, we are introducing real solutions for Nova Scotians, both to meet their immediate challenges, but in the long term as well, in the area of wind and tidal and solar and natural gas and a whole range.
I recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise this evening to speak for just a few minutes on Bill number 45. As the House may know, I put a bill with, I think, a very similar title forward in the fall session of the legislature in 2011, and had a chance, I think we talked about that here one day, and of course the government shut that bill down too. And one of the things that we did agree upon, at least on this side of the House, regardless of the party, including the other side, as far as I'm concerned, I want to put a bill forward that involves fairness to ratepayers, Madam Speaker. That's a good thing. We're willing to talk about that no matter whose name's on that bill. At least I am, and this party here is, and I'm pretty sure most people on this side of the House are interested in talking about what's fair for Nova Scotians. Because I can tell you, there was a lot of hot air here a few minutes ago, Madam Speaker. That's for sure, and we talk a lot about this air and this energy. Now, I got to tell you, the Premier of this province should consider the honourable member that just spoke for perhaps as Minister of Energy, because when he stands up, at least he's got some excitement with the message he's trying to give. People hear him. They don't understand him, perhaps, in what he's saying, but they do hear, Madam Speaker. Some of the things he talked about, we know. It's obvious that the government is not interested in taking on this challenge of fairness to ratepayers in this province. We know that. There's a rising cost that we're all aware of that is driven by a number of things, and we know that too, Madam Speaker. We need transparency around the cost of government policies impacting the power rates. We know that too. We haven't seen it. Nova Scotia Power has the free rein to do as they see fit when it comes to setting the rate. And what's better, they've got the URB, which is an arm's length from government entity that says it's okay to do it. They set the rate. What other company around the world has the URB or any organization like that saying, this is what you are going to profit, and oh, by the way, it's the ratepayer / the taxpayer, because they are one and the same. I've said that many times. I'll continue to say it. Are the same people, Madam Speaker. We have to be considerate of where we're going to end up. Now, back a few years ago in a previous government, the minister at that time and cabinet and all members of this House at that time passed a bill in this House that was reflective of a policy going forward that made sense, that had a great deal of work put into it and time, that was a path that was affordable, and that is certainly not a path that we are on today. And it's interesting that the member will stand up and talk about how we should have affordable policies going forward, but has no answers to what those costs are. He talks about the great relationship. I believe that was his word that he had with the province of Newfoundland. As far as I know, there's no deal signed yet. Maybe he, as the future Minister of Energy, may have some knowledge of that or is in consultation with the Minister of Energy, but obviously the Minister and the Premier are not in consultation with anybody else in this House or any Nova Scotian with regards to what affordability means. We ask the questions in this House. We ask the questions in estimates. Madam Speaker, what is the cost of energy going to be from the project in Newfoundland? What's affordable? There is no answer. They don't know. So how can that possibly be fair to the ratepayer? How can that be fair to anyone when we don't know what those policies are? Now, we put forward a number of bills, and they'll be reintroduced as well, Madam Speaker, with regards to things around ratepayer, things around the cost of doing business in the province of Nova Scotia by way of small business, large business, and certainly individual ratepayers here in this province when it comes to what the cost of their power bill will be. No one even knows the price of a kilowatt hour, and if they do, they're not willing to share that. Perhaps they should dig a little deeper and be transparent and be forward with the people in this province. Tell them what the long-term plan is going to be. They don't even have a short-term plan, let alone a long-term plan. Muskrat Falls is dubbed as some great plan, but far from it when we don't know what the costs will be. We haven't done the homework. Now, this bill goes back and it talks about Nova Scotia Power having to do a performance-based audit. Well, we know what their performance is like. We also know what kind of money they're making and moving around within and not investing back in this province. We put forward a bill in this House reflective of what's fair to ratepayers, Madam Speaker. What was that bill? That was a bill that was very much reflective of transparency. Did the government call it? No, the government didn't call that either, I don't think. The government is not prepared, and it's unfortunate that we put forward a number of good bills in the opposition, and in years past, bills were considered. There have been members in the opposition who have put bills forward and got through because they were worthwhile discussing. Regardless of what the final outcome was, they did make it across the hall. They did get to the Red Chamber to law amendments. Now, Madam Speaker, why that's not something as important as an energy bill that could possibly be voted on and moved over there, and let Nova Scotia, let businesses come in, let individuals come in and talk about something like ratepayer protection. They need it. We look at the New Page saga that's been going on now for months. Here we have a potential deal looming. We've had a vote by the workers there. It's about the survival of that community in the Strait area and all Nova Scotia for that matter, because every job in this province counts, especially given the number of jobs we've lost, the number of people that are moving away because they see no hope. A lot of this is based on the fact they can't feed their families and can't pay their bills. When you look at increasing rates with no future in sight of where they're going to be, what will the rates be? We don't know. What's going to keep them here? Again, you know, we need to put something in place, and we've done that in the past as well with regards to equity and with regards to bonuses. As you know, Madam Speaker, we've put forward a bill. I put forward a bill in this House that had to do with taking out things like bonuses out of ratepayer requirement, or rate requirement, as Nova Scotia Power likes to call it in their meetings when they put forward their idea of what their upcoming rates will be for the coming year. It's rate requirement. Well, what is that? It doesn't go into much detail. The minister can't even tell us, as I said earlier, what a kilowatt of power costs us in this province. Why is that? It shouldn't be that hard. You can't go forward with a long-term plan when you have no plan at all. No short-term plan, no plan. Renewables, we all agree. Renewables are a good source, a good way to go. We need to do it at a pace, however, that is affordable to Nova Scotians. We do not have that. We've seen both previous speakers have talked to the number of rate increases and over 30% in 7 years. That's unacceptable. When we move forward, you know, we talk about things like coal. We've been on coal for a lifetime here. Yes, we do need to wean off of those kinds of energy sources, and I think a long-term plan somewhere down the road may do that, but may not totally. Those are also valuable jobs in the coal industry and in other industries in this province, Madam Speaker. We can't just say tomorrow that we're going to get off. They're setting dates, they're putting forward plans and say, oh, we're going to shut that down and we're going to move to all green energy. We don't even know what those sources are going to be. We don't know what costs are going to be. Is that affordable? We don't think so. Again, the minister not willing to tell us. What are the targets? Are there targets? He says there are targets. How are we ever going to meet those targets? We need to get back to a balanced energy plan that works for all Nova Scotia, whether that is more years in coal production, whether that's Newfoundland. It may end up to be a great deal, but who knows, because we don't know what that means yet. We don't know what the costs are. We don't know if we can afford it. We have tidal that's on the cusp out there of being developed, which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It's right there in my backyard in the Minas Basin. That's a wonderful thing. We need to continue to focus on the technology to make that in my backyard. That's what I call that out there in the Minas Basin. Minister, that's what I call that, my backyard. And why wouldn't I? Supporting a great company out there called Minas Basin that is investing in the production of future tidal power, which is a good thing. And we need to make our way toward those greener sources of energy, but at an affordable pace, one that all Nova Scotians know what the cost is going to be so that they can plan, so that they can feed their families. Those are important issues in Nova Scotia. Ratepayer fairness has to come into play. Whether the government realizes it, and I think that they do, but they don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about a plan they developed to hurry it up, one that's not affordable. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I know we don't have much time. These bills, regardless of who's putting them forward, which party it is, need to be considered seriously for further debate, to get over to the law amendments, to allow people to come in, individuals that feel the pain every day to come in here, big business, small business that feel the pain every day to come in here and offer their comments, to tell government what's real in Nova Scotia today. And with those few words, Madam Speaker, thank you very much.
I recognize the Honourable House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That concludes the official opposition business for today. I thank all the members for their interventions and would now turn it over to the Government House Leader for tomorrow's business.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, bills after daily routine and question period tomorrow, Madam Speaker, calling, excuse me, Bill 5, 9, 11, 13, 17, 20, 22, 24, 30, 32, 34, 37, 39, and 41. I wish the House to now rise, Madam Speaker, to meet from the hours of noon to 8 p.m.
The motion is that we do...
Committee of the House. Supply will also meet tomorrow, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is that we do now rise to meet again tomorrow, April the 26th, between the hours of noon and 8 p.m. All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned.